discovered, you boys and girls.
For a tiny island, Britain has punched way above its weight in the creative arena for the last 50 years, unleashing wave upon wave of musical innovation and producing idiosyncratic style icons who shape the course of popular music. This series tells the story of British pop music through the prism of related art forms, revealing how imagery defined the medium, the phenomenal influence of art schools, the scene's love affair with fashion, and the pivotal role of the star makers and Svengalis who invented the rules of the modern music industry as they went along.
What pop music has managed to do is transmit intellectual ideas to a nation that doesn't like to think of itself as being intellectual.
In the event that this fantastic boy...
Fuck art, let's dance, proclaimed the famous slogan on a post-punk t-shirt, expressing the rebellious musical spirit that thrived in art colleges at the time. Ironically, it was precisely this spirit that had led to British art colleges contributing to pop music culture on a scale unmatched elsewhere. Every band that hadn't met at art college boasted an art college graduate, or found itself steered, styled, sloganised, photographed and reported on by their like. In this opening episode, we examine the phenomenon and see if this uniquely British impulse has run its course. Our guides include art school alumni Graham Coxon of Blur, Colin Newman of Wire, Martin Ware of Heaven 17, airside designer and art college lecturer Fred Deakin, and award-winning author Simon Reynolds.
Art schools are just so hugely important to the evolution of British rock music and pop music. I think the fact is that there's more art schools per capita in Britain than any other country in the world.
The nation itself was starting to fall apart and yet still had this weird sense of its own importance. The idea that the socialist government after the war had created a new form of education, and suddenly young people that previously wouldn't have had access to a certain sort of education could suddenly have education, and they could go to this thing called art school.
You got into art school for a long time, until the mid-60s, on ability and enthusiasm rather than on grades, qualifications, or which school you went to. And there you met a melting pot of ideas across all the disciplines, across music, design, art, photography.
Suddenly there were tons and tons of art schools in Britain encouraging actually quite subversive ideas at exactly the same moment that national service ran out. Now, either someone's in charge of that and it's a great plan, or it is just a quirk of fate, but it is interesting.
I think that art schools are the place where creative mavericks inevitably end up, and if you put all of them in a container and mix it up for 3 years, something exciting is bound to happen.
One of the crucial things about British art schools is it wasn't just that they were art schools, it was the way art was taught. It was like about individuality, ideas, concepts, sort of, there was a great, even if you were learning the craft of design or whatever, there was a generalised atmosphere of breaking with old paradigms, just sort of experimenting.
It's a place that you can express yourself. Some musicians have ended up as designers, and some designers have ended up, or artists have ended up as musicians, and some, like Paul Simonon, have done both.
They were teaching young people who had this peculiar interest in music that was coming over from America, and yet could apply European art techniques to it. And so it was a wonderful kind of combination of two things that could have only really happened in this country.
London calling, see we ain't got no swing, except for the ring of the truncheon thing.
Ironically, given what a great social leveller the institution can be, one art school is more equal than others. Central St Martin's, for many years based in Soho's sordid heart, has just moved to chic new premises in King's Cross. Former St Martin's student Fred Deakin made a name for himself in music as a DJ and part of electronic duo Lemon Jelly, whilst also co-founding the hit graphic design firm Airside. He's now returned to teach creativity at the college.
As far as rock and roll art schools are concerned, St Martin's is the rockiest, and that's kind of consensus on that. For me, when I was a teenager, St Martin's was in Soho, and the whole of London's cool club scene was in Soho. So you'd see the students spilling out the door, going straight into the nearest club. They'd all be going to Taboo or whatever, hanging out with Lee Bowery. And that was the relationship then. And that reputation was its cultural home, was kind of the heart of clubland, the heart of London club culture.
In the 70s, I went to the Central School of Art and Design, and so did Lena Lovitch, Joe Strummer. We were all in the same school, actually. That was a really great place to be in the early 70s. It was a sort of sea of denim, actually. I remember thinking, oh, I'll have to get denim straight away.
Well, there's a huge series of popular music alumni come out of St Martin's. I mean, famously, the Sex Pistols' first gig was in St Martin's.
I don't want a holiday in the sun. I want to go to the New Bell Sun. I want to see some history. Cause now I got a reason about economy. Oh, now I got a reason. Now I got a reason. Now I got a reason. And I'm still waiting. Now I got a reason. Now I got a reason to be waiting. The ball and
You have it as the location for, one of the greatest British records of the 90s, which is Pulp's Common People. And Pulp are again a very interesting example in that Jarvis Cocker was somebody who evaded adult responsibilities until well into his late 20s and early 30s.
She came from Greece, she had a thirst for knowledge. She studied sculpture at St Martin's College. That's where I caught her eye.
St Martin's, because of its central location, was incredibly important. I mean, so many people who worked in the Face and on ID in the 80s came from St Martin's. It's almost like it had lockdown on British youth media.
There were a lot of St Martin's graduates running around London and showing that what they had learnt at the art school was highly monetisable and highly valuable to Britain's creative and cultural cutting edge. The Royal College is the much more establishment place, and it's definitely hugely prestigious. And there are many great art schools in the country, but there's no doubt that St Martin's is the coolest, without a shadow of a doubt. Its place in the pantheon of popular music has been cemented forever, and yeah, that's kind of one of the things that draws people to it, I think.
Britpop favourites Blur went on to become one of the greatest art school bands of recent years, but when they first left college, their obscure sound was enriched only by the extraordinary talent of shy, retiring guitar wizard Graham Coxon.
Blur had to temper their sound, really. The first recordings we made as demos, people like Creation just told us to get out because it was fairly unlistenable, but most of it was influenced by some Creation bands like My Bloody Valentine, but also late psychedelic music and late 60s stuff like Pink Floyd's. And we were trying to marry early Pink Floyd and My Bloody Valentine. I don't think we ever had a problem. I think we were kind of proud of that. It was sort of our heritage. It's what we saw as our heritage, rather like, the people that were obsessed with blues and then got into playing R&B, the Rolling Stones and the Kinks. And I think we saw ourselves as part of that line.
You're dreaming and then you stop dreaming. Time to time you're going on another bender.
I think there's tons of evidence of art schoolism in the music I make. I suppose unconsciously it's in the way I might talk or dress or look, or the way I might even walk down the street, and what is happening in my head, I suppose, comes from that art school. And I think art school is that thing at the end of your teenage that you sort of might go to, if I was being dramatic, like I'm off to a flame. And I think that happens to hundreds and hundreds of people all the time.
The kind of person that would end up doing a foundation course, you know, would often be exactly the kind of person that had trouble at school, that was probably very, very, very clever in a certain sort of way. And you think, obviously, of your John Lennons, you know, they were bright and clearly, you know, curious, literate individuals, but had been buggered by their education, and suddenly could have a form of education that you know, suited them more, suited their mind, suited their need to be different.
Then you're mixing with people that have different ideas. That's fine artists and sculptors mixing with graphic artists. So I suppose people that are fine artists might incompetently try some graphics and actually do something more exciting than people that are very precious about doing graphics. I think that kind of happened quite a lot.
The idea was that you didn't know which particular art you'd be good at until you'd done a foundation course, and I think that was probably the secret of it. And if you found that in fact you prefer to play music, I don't think that would have been frowned upon particularly, because that was your deciding period.
I had one aim only in going to art school, and that was I wanted to get in a band.
I'm lost again and I'm on the run, looking for love in a sad song.
It was part of that synthetic aspect of British pop music, is that kids at quite a young age learned about art, learned about different disciplines, even in the most fragmentary way. They still had the idea that you could make art and that it was something that you could do, and maybe art could impinge on everyday life, which is very important.
A lot of them came out and went into music and brought those artistic or nihilistic or abstract ideas into music. And then they were faced with the most commercial industry. So what really made the thing fascinating and interesting, why it grew and became so special out of the UK, was you had people whose own concept in coming to music was to express themselves, say fuck you to all of society, I'm not going to do anything you say, we're going to do as we want. And then they go into an industry which is the very opposite. You had to do exactly what people wanted. And so there's this bringing the mad freedom of art slowly towards the commercial centre, and at the same time just keeping far enough the commercial centre that you kept an idiosyncrasy and something very special of your own.
I can find within my mind a way to go.
It's the last thing that Britain rules the world at in many ways, is that kind of creative spirit. You can see the whole of the world looking to this country, especially when it comes to arts and education in the arts, and going, hang on a second, we've got all these structures in place, we've got all these resources, and yet somehow we're not producing designers and creatives of the same quality that the UK is. What are we doing wrong? It looks like we've replicated the model perfectly, but it's the freedom, it's the danger, it's that spirit that really makes British art schools produce the quality of graduates that it does.
It was a wonderfully kind of fluid set of circumstances that happened at exactly the right moment in time.
Oh, it's cause for concern, always, when you're feeling quite bright, and your filament burns.
Being the greatest art rock band of the punk era was a bit of a poison chalice, but Wire survived to become arguably the most influential non-hit band since the Velvet Underground.
The original band that Wire came out of had its first gig as an end-of-year concert, and we were terrible. We started playing 3 guitars and vocals in one amplifier in my bedroom in North Watford. What rock and roll needed was reinventing, because it was rubbish.